The morning I learned I had been replaced, I was wearing a fluorescent yellow vest and holding a red stop sign in the middle of Maple Avenue. There were 17 children waiting on the pavement, a delivery van idling beside the bakery, and Mrs. Alvarez trying to convince her 6-year-old that rain did not qualify as a medical emergency. And on the corner where I had stood every school morning for 18 years was a man I had never seen before. He was wearing the same yellow vest, the same reflective stripes, the same whistle clipped near his shoulder, and in his hand was a stop sign identical to mine. I looked at him. He looked at me. The children looked between us. Then a 9-year-old girl named Sophie Turner asked, "Mr. Ellis, is that your substitute?" I was 81 years old. I had taught 5th grade for 36 years, been retired for 21, and been a widower for 6. Until that morning, I had never required a substitute for anything. The stranger lowered his sign. "Are you Arthur Ellis?" "Yes." His expression changed. Not guilt. Worse. Pity. "I'm sorry. I thought the office spoke with you." "About what?" "The change." A car approached before he could explain. My body reacted before my pride did. I stepped toward the curb and raised my sign. So did he. For one ridiculous second, 2 elderly men stopped the same sedan. The driver stopped so far back she probably thought the city had doubled its traffic laws overnight. The new man waved the children across. I remained on the pavement. Nobody told me to. Somehow, I already understood. That was no longer my road. My name is Arthur Ellis, and for 18 years every weekday from September through June, I stood at Maple Avenue and Birch Street before school and again when school let out. Rain, snow, heat, wind. Within reason. I was dedicated, not stupid. The job paid almost nothing. Enough each month to buy lunch somewhere nicer than necessary. I never did it for the money. I started because at 70, 8 years after retiring from teaching, I discovered that waking up with nowhere anyone expected you to be is not the freedom people think it is. At first, retirement feels luxurious. Then Sunday begins happening 7 days a week. My wife June noticed before I did. One morning she placed the local newspaper beside my coffee and tapped a small advertisement. Crossing guards needed. Part-time. School district. Morning and afternoon. I told her, I was a teacher, June. I am not standing in traffic holding a lollipop. She said, "It's called a stop paddle." I asked how she knew. She said, "I read the advertisement while you were complaining." 3 weeks later, I started. 18 years after that, someone replaced me without even making me late first. I walked into Maple Ridge Elementary still wearing my vest. The front secretary, Diana, looked up and immediately made the face of someone who knew something I was not supposed to know. 36 years of teaching children makes you excellent at recognizing that face. "Arthur," she said carefully, "Principal Green wants to see you." I assume Principal Green has recently lost the ability to use a telephone. 5 minutes later I was standing in his office. Principal Green was 43, kind, nervous, and always wore shoes that looked too expensive to survive an elementary school. He closed the door. "Arthur, please sit. I've been standing since 6:30. I would prefer to continue." He stayed seated, which gave me approximately 6 inches of psychological advantage. "First, I owe you an apology." "Yes." He waited for me to make that easier. I did not. Teachers are excellent at silence. Children taught us that. Finally he said, "We received some concerns." "From whom?" "Your family." I sat down then. Not because he asked. My niece simply decided they had opinions. "My family?" "Your daughter contacted the district." "Rebecca." My daughter was 55, a physical therapist, and therefore possessed professional vocabulary for every way I could potentially fall. She lived 15 minutes away with her husband Daniel and their 16-year-old son Noah. Noah mattered more to what happened than I understood that morning. "What did Rebecca tell you?" "That you nearly fell twice this month." "I stumbled once." "Twice. Who is telling this story?" I had caught my boot on the curb 10 days earlier. I recovered immediately. The second incident happened when a child dropped a mitten. I bent down to pick it up and my knee objected on the way back, so I steadied myself on the signpost for perhaps 1 second. Apparently that had become evidence. Principal Green continued. She also mentioned the SUV. That was not my incident. 3 weeks earlier, a large SUV had rolled halfway through the crossing after I entered the road. I blew the whistle, the driver stopped, and I kept every child behind the curb until it was safe. Exactly as trained. The driver was impatient. I was not slow. Rebecca said you were shaken. Of course I was shaken. A 2-ton vehicle ignored the sign in my hand. That seems like an appropriate time to become shaken. Principal Green nodded. I agree. That stopped me. Then why is somebody else standing on my corner? Once a formal safety concern is raised, the district has to review it. Until then, we reassign the crossing. Without speaking to me. His hesitation answered the question. I removed the vest, folded it, and placed it beside the stop sign against his desk. Tell Rebecca she can collect those. Arthur. She appears to work here now. Rebecca was waiting in my driveway when I got home. That did not improve matters. She stood against her car with her arms crossed exactly the way June used to stand when she was preparing to tell me something I did not wish to hear. I considered it genetic intimidation. Dad? Do not dad me. I knew this was going to happen. Then your predictive skills are excellent. She tried to get me inside because it was cold. I refused because anger is warmer outdoors. Finally she said, I was trying to protect you. There it was. The favorite sentence of adult children everywhere. Not I was right. Not I was wrong. Just I was protecting you, as though intention is a receipt you can show after breaking something. You contacted my employer. It's barely an employer. That made me angrier. They pay me. Barely. So now work counts only if it is profitable? That isn't what I meant. It is exactly what you meant. You think because I am 81 and the money is small, the job is decorative. Rebecca's patience broke. You nearly fell into traffic. I stumbled. You don't know the difference anymore. We both heard it. She looked sorry immediately. I decided not to make it easy for her. What exactly don't I know anymore? That isn't what I meant. It is what you said. She took a breath. You are slower. Your balance is worse. You get tired. I've been tired since 1978. This isn't funny. It is not your decision. Her voice became softer. What if you get hurt? What if I do? People dislike that question, especially when you are old. They want you to promise not to fall, not to become ill, not to make them afraid. As though mortality becomes rude after 70. Rebecca said, I don't want a phone call telling me you were hit by a car. And I don't want to arrange the rest of my life around the phone calls you are afraid to receive. That hurt her. I knew it. I told her to leave anyway. At 2:45 that afternoon, for the first time in 18 years, I had nowhere to be. That was the part I had not prepared for. By 2:30 I had washed a clean mug, reorganized a drawer that did not require organization, checked the weather twice, and ended up standing at my front window looking toward Birch Street. The children appeared at the end of the block. I knew their routines. Sophie would run the final 20 yards even though I had told her 400 times not to run near the crossing. The Torres twins would argue over who crossed first. Mason would drag one backpack strap along the pavement until the fabric eventually surrendered. I knew which children needed reminding to zip their coats, which parent was late on Wednesday, whose dog had died, whose mother had a new baby. I knew those things because for 18 years people had passed through my morning. Now I watched them through glass. And I discovered I missed the whistle. Not the sound. The permission. A whistle lets an old man interrupt traffic without apologizing. The next morning I woke at 6:15 automatically, shaved, made coffee, and put on my work trousers before remembering there was no work. At 7:20 I stood at the window. My replacement was on the corner. His name, I later learned, was Calvin Brooks. 74. Retired postal worker. Bad left shoulder. Excellent hat. At the time, all I knew was that he stood where I had stood. I disliked the way he held the sign. Too low. I disliked his position. Too close to the curb. I disliked how long he waited between groups. Too cautious. By 7:40 I had developed 17 criticisms of a man who had done nothing except temporary work. June would have caught me. She would have asked, "Are you angry at him, Arthur, or angry that he can stand where you stood?" And I would have spent the rest of breakfast pretending not to understand. I missed June most when she would have annoyed me. We had been married 51 years. People like to rewrite long marriages as though they are half a century of candlelight and perfect understanding. They are not. A long marriage is love, loyalty, forgiveness, and two people eventually deciding that the same argument does not require a winner after 43 repetitions. June had been a librarian. She understood what work had meant to me because usefulness had meant the same thing to her. Names. Questions. Small problems requiring small answers. Retirement removed those faster than either of us expected. That was why she found the crossing job. 6 years after her death, I think part of me still worked that corner because it was a place where I could hear her logic. And Rebecca had taken it away. Or that was the version I preferred. 3 days later my son Michael called. Michael was 52, owned a plumbing company, and lived 600 miles away. He usually called Sunday evenings. This was Friday. Rebecca told me. That narrows nothing down. About the crossing job. Former crossing job. He sighed. She was worried. Both my children have mastered the same sentence. Then I asked the question I already suspected I would hate. Did you know she planned to contact the district? She mentioned it. When? Last week. And what did you say? I told her she should talk to you. And? He hesitated. I told her I understood why she was worried. So both of you decided? No. That 81 men incapable. I never said that. Then Michael surprised me. You want the truth? I was relieved she called. That hurt more. Rebecca lived nearby and actually saw me. Michael saw me twice a year and still felt relieved someone had removed part of my life. Why? Because I'm 600 miles away, Dad. Every time Rebecca tells me something happened, I can't do anything. She says you tripped, I can't check on you. She says your furnace sounds wrong, I can't come over. She says you're standing in traffic every day, I can't stop worrying. So when she said the school might make you stop, part of me was relieved. Standing in traffic. For 18 years he had called it my job. I hung up before either of us said anything worse. That evening I opened the hall cupboard looking for reasons to remain angry. June called this evidence shopping. Whenever we argued, I developed a remarkable ability to remember every related offense committed since 1972. She considered it unfair. I considered it research. The cupboard contained old gloves, rain gear, whistles and the boots June had bought because she said mine leaked. On the top shelf was a blue shoebox. I had forgotten it. Inside were thank you cards collected over 18 years. Crayon drawings. Misspelled messages. Stick figures wearing enormous yellow vests. One child had written, "Thank you Mr. Ellis for not letting cars squish us." Concise. Accurate. I appreciated it. Another card was from a frightened second grader named Hannah. She had written that she liked that I waited until she was ready to cross. Not that I crossed her. That I waited. At the bottom was one card in June's handwriting. I had not seen it in years. On the front was a cartoon school bus. Inside she had written, "For your first week on the corner, try not to organize the children alphabetically." I smiled. Then I read the next sentence. You are happiest when somebody expects you. 18 years earlier. Long before cancer. Long before hospital rooms. Long before I learned the sound of our house after only one person remained in it. You are happiest when somebody expects you. I left the card on the kitchen table overnight. Monday morning somebody knocked at 7:10. It was Sophie Turner, carrying a paper bag, with her father standing behind her. Inside were 6 blueberry muffins. One had been crushed. My mom made them, but I packed them. That explains the structural damage. She laughed, then became serious. Are you sick? No. Did you quit? No. Did you get fired? Children arrive at truth with the subtlety of furniture delivery. Something like that. Sophie looked at the ground. I liked when you were there. There are compliments an old man knows how to survive. Nice shirt. Good garden. You look well. That one was harder. I told her Mr. Brooks was doing a good job. She said, he doesn't know Mason cheats. Cheats at what? Crossing. I decided some mystery should remain. By the end of the week I had received 27 cards, 3 bags of biscuits, homemade jam, a drawing of myself with arms longer than my body, and a paper crown that said Best Crossing Guy. I wore the crown alone in the kitchen for approximately 30 seconds. Then removed it before dignity suffered permanent damage. Rebecca called every day. I did not answer. Michael called twice. I answered once by mistake and pretended the connection had failed. This was not mature. Age and maturity are related far less closely than advertised. Then Saturday afternoon Noah arrived. 16 years old. Tall, quiet, dark-haired. June used to say Noah observed a room before entering it. She meant emotionally. He came in carrying his backpack. Your mother know you're here? No. Excellent. I am apparently encouraging rebellion now. He sat at the kitchen table. I made tea. He did not drink it. Teenagers regard tea as evidence that adults have surrendered joy. For several minutes he said nothing. Then he said, Mom didn't tell you everything. About what? The SUV. What didn't she tell me? I was there. I had not seen him. He said he had been across the road. He had watched the SUV roll forward, watched me keep the children behind me, and watched the vehicle stop. Then he had noticed something I had dismissed. My hand was shaking. Adrenaline. Anger. Cold. Any explanation satisfied me. None satisfied Noah. I called Mom. Everything rearranged itself. You told Rebecca? I told her I was worried. Why didn't she tell me? Because I asked her not to. He looked younger than 16 suddenly. Why? Because I knew you'd be mad. At you? At everyone. I almost argued. The previous week offered poor evidence for my defense. Noah said he had never wanted me fired. He wanted his mother to check on me. Then he apologized. I wanted to tell him he was 16 and had no right to decide what his grandfather could do. Then I saw his hands. He was rubbing his thumb against his index finger over and over. June used to do that when anxious. Why were you so frightened? I don't know. That is rarely true. He stared at the table. Then said one word. Grandma. Noah had been 10 when June died. Old enough to remember everything and young enough to understand almost none of it. 3 days before she died, he visited her in hospital. June made him promise to keep reading. Noah made June promise she would come home. Only one of them kept the promise. When Grandma was sick, he said, everybody said she was okay even when she wasn't. Mom said she was tired. You said the treatments were going well. Grandma told me not to worry. And then she died. There are moments when being old does not make you wiser. It only gives you more mistakes to recognize. Noah looked at me. So when Mom says you're fine and you say you're fine, I don't know what fine means anymore. The boy was right. We adults had taught him that reassurance could mean information withheld. 6 years later he saw his grandfather's hand shaking near a moving car. He did not see stubborn independence. He saw another adult saying fine. I put my hand over his. I was scared too. His eyes lifted. The SUV? Yes. You never said. No. Why? Because I thought if I admitted I was scared, everybody would use it as proof that I should stop. Noah thought about that. Then asked, were they right? Teenagers have no respect for timing. I don't know. That answer surprised both of us. Monday morning I called Principal Green. I want the safety review. I thought you were angry. I contain several abilities at once. The district required a physical assessment, vision check, balance testing and an observation at the crossing. I agreed to all of it on one condition. Rebecca received no updates unless I gave permission. Then I added that Calvin Brooks was holding the sign too low. Principal Green sighed and promised to make a note. The physical assessment was humiliating mostly because it was ordinary. Stand on 1 foot, turn, walk, rise from a chair. At 81, ordinary movement becomes data. The therapist, Leah, told me my strength was good and my balance generally good, but my right ankle was weaker. It had been weak since I injured it at 46. You compensate well, she said. Successfully. Usually. I did not enjoy usually. She recommended better footwear, stretching, balance exercises, and shorter shifts during severe weather. Nothing about retirement. I left feeling vindicated and mildly offended that someone 38 years old had needed to certify my ankles. The district observed me the following Wednesday. Calvin stepped aside. I put on the yellow vest again. It was cheap polyester and possibly the least dignified garment ever manufactured. Yet the moment I fastened it, I felt like myself. Sophie saw me and shouted, "You're back." Temporarily. That means yes for now. Smart girl. The morning went well. I checked traffic, made eye contact with drivers, held the sign high and kept the children behind the curb. Then at 8:02, Eli dropped his water bottle into the road and stepped after it. Without thinking, I caught the back of his backpack and pulled him onto the pavement. The nearest car was still 40 feet away. No heroic rescue. Just an 8-year-old being 8 and an old teacher still faster than stupidity when necessary. Afterward, the evaluator told me my awareness was excellent and my judgment sound. Then she said, "I'm recommending reinstatement." Victory. I immediately imagined calling Rebecca. I considered whether an apology should be written and possibly notarized. Then the evaluator added, "With modifications." Morning crossings only for 3 months. No severe ice. A second guard during unusually heavy traffic. Shorter exposure to reduce fatigue. I objected to approximately all of it. She listened and finally asked, "Mr. Ellis, do you want the job, or do you want the exact version of the job you had at 70? Unfair question. Unfair questions are frequently the useful ones. The next day Principal Green offered me the morning shift. I had spent 2 weeks fighting to get it back. Now I told him I needed to think. That afternoon Calvin Brooks arrived at my house holding a casserole. "My wife made this." "Why?" "She cooks when I'm uncomfortable." "Are you uncomfortable?" "Very." "Come in." We sat at my kitchen table. Calvin told me he hoped the district kept him somewhere if I returned. I asked why. His answer changed how I saw him. "My wife has Parkinson's." Lorraine was not dying. She still lived at home, still cooked casseroles when Calvin was uncomfortable, and still argued with him daily. But her illness had narrowed both of their lives. Nearly everything revolved around medication, appointments, meals and making sure she was safe. Calvin loved his wife. He also needed 2 hours each day that belonged to something else. So when the district offered temporary work, he took it. The man had not stolen my corner. He had needed one. I asked why he held the sign so low. He pointed to his left shoulder. "I knew it," I said. "You knew what?" "That it was too low." We spent 40 minutes discussing crossing technique because this is how men our age avoid discussing mortality. Sunday evening Rebecca returned. This time I let her inside. She brought no groceries, no pamphlets, and no lists of things I was statistically likely to injure. Progress. I heard you passed. Who told you? Noah. Traitor. He was happy. So was I. Then she apologized. Not vaguely. She apologized for contacting the district before speaking to me, for treating Noah's fear as proof, and for collecting my stumbles like evidence instead of asking how I felt. Then she said, "But I am not sorry I was worried. I never asked you to stop worrying. You punish people for it." That was not in the version of the conversation I had rehearsed. What? You do. If we worry, you call us controlling. If we offer help, you say you can do it. If we ask how you are, you say fine. Then if something happens, you tell us we should have trusted you. I am allowed privacy. Yes. I am allowed independence. Yes. But sometimes you use independence as a wall, Dad, then get angry nobody knows what is happening behind it. She noticed June's card on the counter. What's that? Nothing. Rebecca laughed once. There. That. I handed her the card. She read June's words. You are happiest when somebody expects you. Rebecca smiled, then became tearful. She knew you. Yes. Better than we do. I surprised myself. That is partly my fault. I told Rebecca that the SUV had scared me. She looked stunned. You never said that. I thought fear would become a vote against me. Then she said something I was not prepared for. Mom used to say the same thing about you. What? She said if she admitted something was getting harder, you would try to do it for her. I remembered June's final year. How often I carried things before she asked. Answered questions directed at her. Told visitors she needed to rest while she was still speaking. I called it care. Mostly, it was. But care can become control without announcing the moment it crosses the line. Rebecca had learned something from me that I had not intended to teach. I told her she had still been wrong to go behind my back. She agreed. Then I admitted I had probably done the same thing to June in smaller ways for years. Finally Rebecca asked, "Are you going back?" "I don't know." That answer was becoming less frightening. The next morning I walked to the crossing without my vest or sign. I stood across the street while Calvin worked. His sign was higher. Much better. I watched Sophie, Mason, Eli and the Torres twins cross safely. Without me. That was harder than expected. Then something stranger happened. I felt relieved. The road continued working. Children crossed. Cars stopped. School began. Civilization apparently did not depend on Arthur Ellis. For years I thought being necessary was comforting. Standing there, I realized it could also become a trap. Because if your value depends on nobody being able to replace you, eventually time wins. At 10 that morning, I called Principal Green. I have a proposal. I was afraid of that. I would return mornings only for 3 months and reassess after that. Calvin would keep afternoons. On icy mornings, Calvin worked. During heavy traffic, 2 guards. Principal Green asked whether I had thought this through. I was a teacher. We invent schedules to avoid emotions. Monday morning I returned. Yellow vest. Stop sign. New boots Rebecca bought me. I accepted them because they were objectively better boots. Growth must remain practical. Sophie saw me first. Mr. Ellis. One child began clapping. Then another. Within seconds, 14 elementary school children were applauding me at 7:30 in the morning. It was unbearable. I loved every second. I told them to save the applause for someone important. Sophie answered, "You are important." Children have no respect for emotional preparation. At 2:45 that afternoon, I stayed home deliberately. Calvin handled the crossing. I made coffee, read the newspaper and completed half a crossword. At 3:30, I discovered I had survived. By Friday, I almost enjoyed my free afternoons. Almost. Then Principal Green asked if I would mentor 6 struggling 4th grade readers one afternoon a week. I said no. He accepted that immediately. Then said, "Tuesday at 1?" I hung up on him. And appeared Tuesday at 1. There were 6 children. One of them was Marcus. 10 years old, smart mouth, smarter brain, and a relationship with books that appeared legally hostile. I sat beside him. "You dislike reading?" "Yes." "Excellent." He looked at me. "What?" "I dislike running. People keep recommending it." Marcus smiled. 45 minutes later, he had read 3 pages. Painfully. Slowly. Successfully. As I stood to leave, he asked, "Are you coming next week?" June's card appeared in my mind. "You are happiest when somebody expects you." "Yes," I told Marcus. "I'm coming next week." That was when I first understood the corner had never been the point. The expectation was. My week changed. Morning crossing duty. Tuesday reading group. Lunch with Calvin on Thursday. Yes, Calvin and I became friends. This irritated both of us. His wife Lorraine sent food. I returned the dishes with increasingly dishonest criticism. Too salty. Not salty enough. Suspicious use of paprika. She ignored every note. Rebecca and I repaired too, but not through one grand conversation. We repaired through smaller permissions. She asked before carrying something. I occasionally said yes. She asked about my ankle. I stopped automatically answering fine. Sometimes I simply said, sore. Nothing collapsed. Nobody confiscated my shoes. I began learning that information was not surrender. Then in February, Calvin disappeared. No warning. No casserole. Principal Green covered the afternoon crossing for 2 days. Calvin ignored my calls. On the 3rd day, Lorraine called. "I'm sorry he didn't call." "Is he all right?" "He's fine." "Fine." I thought of Noah. "Lorraine, what does fine mean?" She started crying. Lorraine had fallen at home and broken her wrist. Nothing catastrophic, but with Parkinson's, a fall could rearrange more than bones. Calvin no longer felt comfortable leaving her alone. So he quit. I visited them that afternoon. Lorraine sat with her wrist supported, looking embarrassed. I knew that expression. It was the face of someone whose body had become a family discussion. Calvin told me he could not go back to work. From the living room Lorraine shouted, "I am not a Labrador." Calvin closed his eyes. I smiled. I recognized a marriage still functioning. Lorraine insisted he could leave her for 2 hours. Calvin refused. Then she revealed he had supposedly gone out for milk the previous morning and taken 40 minutes. The store was 5 minutes away. I looked at Calvin. He knew I knew. He had probably sat in the car. 15 minutes, perhaps 20. Not because he did not love his wife. Because he needed to be somewhere nobody needed him for 15 minutes. June's words returned again. "You are happiest when somebody expects you." I finally saw the other side. Sometimes you also need somewhere nobody does. "I'll stay with Lorraine Thursday afternoon." Lorraine shouted, "I do not need a sitter." "I know." "Then why?" "Because Calvin needs one." That ended the argument. Thursday I arrived at 1:30. Calvin left 10 minutes later and returned at 3:30. I never asked where he went. Later I learned he spent an hour in the library reading a newspaper. Lorraine and I spent the afternoon arguing over a television quiz show. When Calvin returned, he looked different. Not younger. Rested. That afternoon taught me helping does not always mean doing something difficult. Sometimes it simply means sitting in a room so somebody else can leave it. In March my right knee began aching. Not severely. Nothing dramatic. Just persistent. The kind of pain younger people announce and older people negotiate with. I stretched, changed shoes, took pain relief and ignored it. Ignoring was least effective, so naturally it became the strategy I used longest. Rebecca noticed at dinner when I put my hand on the table to stand. Knee? Yes. Then she did nothing. No lecture. No appointment behind my back. No school district. She waited. I hated how effective waiting was. I have a doctor's appointment Thursday. Rebecca smiled. I pointed a fork at her. Do not enjoy this. I'm not. You are. A little. The doctor said arthritis. Manageable, but long periods standing were aggravating it. He suggested reducing the crossing to 3 mornings a week. Maybe 2 eventually. I thanked him, then sat in my car outside the clinic for 20 minutes. The first time the job was threatened, Rebecca had chosen for me. I fought because she had taken the choice. Now the choice belonged completely to me. It was not easier. Nobody tells you that part. Independence does not mean your decisions stop hurting. It means the hurt is yours to weigh. I drove to the cemetery. June's grave sat beneath an old maple tree she had chosen herself. I had objected because falling leaves would make maintenance difficult. June said, "Arthur, I will be dead. I am willing to accept leaves." Reasonable woman. I stood before her headstone. Apparently I have arthritis. No response. You could sound surprised. I told her about the crossing. Rebecca. Noah. Calvin. Lorraine. Marcus and his hatred of books. Then I told her I might reduce my shifts again. I know what you would say. The trees remained unimpressed. You would tell me the corner is not the point. Then I looked at her name and finally admitted the thing I had avoided. But it was our corner too. June had found the job. Packed coffee for my first week. Bought my boots. Complained when I came home soaked. Listened to stories about children she had never met. After she died, I kept going partly because people expected me. And partly because every time I put on that yellow vest, I was still doing something June had chosen for me. Stopping felt like losing another piece of her. I sat on the cemetery bench for a long time. Then I laughed. June would have hated my logic. She had spent 51 years trying to get me to change my mind. The idea that I was honoring her by refusing to change anything would have offended her personally. Monday morning I called Principal Green. 3 mornings. Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Yes. And reading group Tuesday? Yes. What about Thursday? None of your business. Thursday belonged to Calvin and Lorraine. Not every week. Every other week. Sometimes I sat with Lorraine. Sometimes Rebecca did. We accidentally created a small rota. Calvin hated the word respite. I called it Thursday. By spring, the strangest thing happened. I was busier working less. The crossing gave me 3 mornings. Reading group gave me Tuesday. Calvin and Lorraine gave me Thursday. Friday afternoon I began volunteering at the library where June had worked. I helped older visitors use the computers. This was ironic because I barely understood the computers myself. But I understood embarrassment. That mattered more. One afternoon, a 78-year-old man named Walter came in because his granddaughter had emailed him a photograph and he wanted to print it. He apologized 6 times for not knowing how. I said, "Walter, I taught children for 36 years. Not knowing something is the beginning of my entire profession." 20 minutes later we printed the photograph. His granddaughter was holding his first great-grandchild. Walter stared at the page and cried. I pretended to inspect the printer. Old men are extremely interested in office equipment when emotions appear. On the way home I thought again. The corner is not the point. The next crisis came from Michael. He called on Wednesday instead of Sunday. I immediately knew something was wrong. "Dad? What happened?" "Nothing. I'm fine." Fine had become the most suspicious word in our family. What does fine mean? Michael's plumbing company was struggling. 2 large customers had not paid invoices. A work van needed replacing. Insurance costs had risen. For 4 months he had been using personal savings to help cover payroll. His wife knew. Nobody else did. "And you said nothing?" "I had it handled." I almost laughed. Apparently stupidity was hereditary. "Michael, should I call your customers without permission?" "Dad? Perhaps your bank. I can explain that you are 52 and slower than you used to be." "Dad?" He laughed despite himself. Then he apologized for saying he had been relieved when Rebecca reported me. "I think I understand now." "You own a company," I said. "And you had trouble because you were afraid telling people would give them permission to decide you could no longer manage." Silence. "Yes." "And did hiding it help?" "No." 3 generations of Ellis men learning the same lesson at different speeds. I did not offer Michael money. He did not ask. We talked about his customers, employees, and the fear of failing people who depended on him. I recognized that fear. It was mine wearing younger clothes. 2 weeks later Michael came home for the weekend. Friday evening Rebecca, Daniel and Noah joined us. For the first time in years, both of my children sat at my kitchen table without a holiday requiring it. June's chair was empty. It had been empty 6 years. That evening I noticed it differently. Not as a missing person. As a space the rest of us had learned to live around. Michael told Rebecca about his company. She was furious, mostly because he had kept it secret. "You knew about Dad and said nothing to me. You knew your business was struggling and said nothing. Why does everyone in this family communicate only after disaster?" Noah raised his hand. We all looked at him. "I communicate before disaster now." We laughed. Even June's chair seemed less empty. Later Michael and I sat on the porch. He asked whether I missed afternoon crossing duty. "Yes." "Do you regret cutting back?" "No." "How can both be true?" I thought for a moment. Because losing something does not mean keeping it would have been right. Michael looked at me. "Mom would have written that down." "Your mother wrote everything down. She once labeled leftovers with emotional warnings." "I remember. Do not eat, Arthur." "Exactly." In May, Marcus finished his first chapter book. 138 pages. He informed me as though he had crossed Antarctica. I treated it accordingly. We celebrated with cupcakes in the library. Principal Green came. Sophie came despite having nothing to do with reading group. Calvin and Lorraine came. Rebecca and Noah came. Michael joined on a video call balanced badly against a stack of books. Marcus looked around the room. "Why are there so many people?" "Because you finished a book." "That's weird." "Yes. Get used to adults being disappointing." Afterward, Principal Green stopped me. "Arthur, next year we're reorganizing crossing assignments." Old fear stirred before I could stop it. Then he said, "I want you to train new guards." I stared at him. 2 mornings a week, he explained. "You can still cover Maple and Birch sometimes, but mostly training." "Why?" "Because apparently nobody else knows Mason cheats at crossing." I laughed. Then realized he was serious. "You want me to teach crossing guards?" "Yes. I retired from teaching 21 years ago." "I have heard." June's words appeared again. "You are happiest when somebody expects you." "I'll think about it." "Tuesday at 9? I dislike you." "I know." The last day of school arrived in June. My 18th year on the corner. And my last year working it regularly. That decision was mine. Not Rebecca's. Not the district's. Not my doctor's. Mine. My knee was manageable. My balance was good. My eyesight was good. I could have continued. But I no longer needed that exact corner to prove anything. There were other places people expected me now. At 7:25 I put on the yellow vest. Calvin stood beside me. He had returned for one morning a week after Lorraine insisted she could survive without observing him continuously. The children arrived. Sophie, Mason, Eli, the twins. I raised my sign. Traffic stopped. Children crossed. A perfectly ordinary morning. That is how most important endings arrive. Not with music or speeches. Just an ordinary thing you realize you may never do the same way again. At 8:10 Sophie was the last child. I checked left, right, left again, raised the sign and stepped into the road. She walked beside me. Halfway across she said, "My dad says you're retiring." I have already retired once. I am becoming very experienced. Will you still be here? Sometimes. That's not the same. No. It isn't. She looked disappointed. Then I pointed toward Calvin. Mr. Brooks will be here. He holds the sign weird. Calvin shouted from the other side, "I can hear you." Sophie laughed and ran toward school. I shouted after her, "Do not run near the crossing." She slowed for approximately 3 steps. Some things never change. Calvin joined me. "You okay?" I looked at the road and the faded white lines I had watched the city repaint at least 6 times. "No." Calvin nodded. That was all. I appreciated him for not telling me everything would be fine. That afternoon, my front garden filled with people. Rebecca, Daniel, Noah, Michael and his wife, Principal Green, Calvin and Lorraine, Diana from the office, and perhaps 30 children and parents. Rebecca had arranged it. Apparently she had redirected her controlling tendencies into catering. There was a cake shaped like a stop sign. It was badly shaped. I told the baker. The baker was Rebecca. This caused difficulties. Then Sophie handed me a binder. Inside were photographs and messages from families I had crossed for 18 years. Some came from children who were now adults. Hannah, the frightened 2nd grader, was now a nurse. Charlie, who once refused to cross because a worm was on the pavement, was an engineer. 2 sisters I remembered as 1st and 3rd graders now had children at Maple Ridge. One message said, "I don't remember every teacher I had, but I remember you standing there every morning." Another said, "When my parents divorced, school mornings were awful. You said good morning to me exactly the same way every day. I needed that more than you knew." I had to stop reading. Rebecca stood beside me and placed a hand on my arm. She did not ask whether I was fine. Good daughter. I looked around my garden at the children, parents, friends and family. People who had expected me. And finally I understood June's sentence. You are happiest when somebody expects you. For years I thought she meant duty. A schedule. A corner. A whistle. But expectation is not obligation. It is connection. Someone noticing whether you arrive. Someone saving your chair. Someone expecting your call. Someone asking if you are coming next Tuesday because you helped them through 3 difficult pages. You do not have to be irreplaceable to matter. Later Noah found me sitting on the porch. He sat beside me with his long legs stretched across the step. "You cried." I did not. "Grandpa." My eyes responded to environmental conditions. "Both eyes?" "Severe weather." He laughed. Then we sat quietly. "Are you scared about stopping?" 6 months earlier I would have said no. Yes. Noah nodded. "Me too." "Why?" "You've always been there." I looked at him. "I'm still here." "I know. But it's different." "Yes." This time, neither of us tried to make different mean bad. I turned 82 last month. I do not regularly work the crossing anymore. I train new guards 2 mornings a week and occasionally cover Maple and Birch. I have become extremely irritating about sign height. Principal Green claims that is why he hired me. Tuesday afternoons still belong to reading group. Marcus now reads above grade level. He continues insisting he hates books. Last week he asked for a recommendation. I did not point out the contradiction. Teachers know when victory should remain private. Thursday alternates between Calvin's house and mine. Lorraine has better weeks and worse weeks, but she is still cooking and Calvin is still uncomfortable frequently enough that none of us are starving. I still complain about the paprika. Friday I volunteer at June's library. A small brass plaque with her name remains beside the reference desk. For years I avoided looking at it. Now sometimes I touch it when I arrive. Not every week. That would be dramatic. June hated drama unless it was on television. Rebecca still worries. I still resent approximately 30% of it. This is improvement. She asks before helping. I answer. Sometimes honestly on the first attempt. More improvement. Michael's company recovered. He negotiated payment plans, reduced expenses and finally told his employees what was happening instead of pretending every problem was invisible. Nobody abandoned him. He found that mildly annoying because it meant secrecy had not been necessary. I understood. Noah is 17 and has his driving license. This created an entirely new category of family fear. Rebecca calls complaining about his driving. I tell her she is controlling. She tells me to be quiet. Balance has been restored. Last week Noah picked me up from the library. He pulled to the curb too quickly. I told him. Grandpa, I am completely stopped. You arrived at stop too aggressively. That is not a thing. It is now. We drove past Maple Ridge as school ended. Calvin stood on the corner with a younger woman he was training. Her sign was too low. I made Noah pull over. Grandpa, we're in traffic. Pull over safely. He did. I lowered the window. Tara. She turned. Higher. She lifted the sign. Calvin shook his head. Noah put his face in his hands. I was very happy. That night I opened the old blue shoebox. Cards. Crayon drawings. An old whistle. June's note. You are happiest when somebody expects you. I used to think aging meant becoming less expected. Children grow up. Jobs end. Spouses die. Friends disappear from calendars and eventually from the world. The places where your name is written seem to become fewer. That is frightening, especially when you have spent your life measuring yourself by who needed you. But I had confused two things. Being needed and being expected. Need can disappear. A child learns to cross. A student learns to read. A son learns to manage his company. Somebody else can hold the stop sign. That is good. You do not raise children so they need your hand forever. You do not teach someone so they remain unable without you. And you do not love people so they become dependent on your usefulness. Expectation is different. Marcus does not need me in order to read anymore. But Tuesday afternoon he expects me. Calvin does not need me to solve his life. But some Thursdays he expects coffee. Rebecca does not need me to solve hers. But she expects me to answer my phone. Michael does not need permission to struggle. But he knows when I ask whether he is fine, I might also ask what fine means. Noah does not need me standing on Maple Avenue. But he expects me to criticize his driving until one of us loses our hearing. And June? June expects nothing now. That took me years to accept. I do not keep living because she is waiting somewhere for me to complete a list. I keep living because she helped me build a life that still contains doors after hers closed. The crossing was one door. It was never the whole house. Rebecca had been wrong to contact the district without speaking to me first. Love does not give you ownership of another adult. Fear does not become authority simply because it comes from family. She needed to learn that. But I had been wrong too. I believed admitting fear would make me weak. I believed accepting help would give people permission to take over. I believed changing a routine meant surrendering the man I had been inside it. Instead I learn you can defend your right to choose and still make a different choice. You can miss something you gave up and still know giving it up was right. You can need help without becoming helpless. And you can stop being necessary without stopping being important. That last lesson took 81 years. I wish June had been here when I finally understood it. Then again, she would have been unbearable. She would smile, say nothing and wait until eventually I asked what she was smiling about. She would say, nothing. And I would know she had been right for 18 years. Perhaps it is better this way. Tomorrow is Tuesday. Marcus expects me at 1 o'clock. He claims he chose our next book himself. I have already seen it. It is too long, the print is too small, and I suspect he chose it partly because he knows I will complain. I will arrive early. Not because he needs me. Because he is expecting me. And after everything that happened, I finally understand the difference.